Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Thursday, January 12th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Indiana game is in 233 days, the game against Michigan in 317 days. Football season does seem like it's a long way away, but it's going to get here closer than you think, sooner than you think. Spring football is going to be here a lot sooner than you think. And between now and then, Ohio State's got to figure out its offensive line situation. The Buckeyes have lost 3 players now to the NFL draft this week. They got a little bit of good news on Wednesday with one very key piece coming back, but there is going to be a lot to sort out for Justin Frye and Brian Day and the rest of the coaching staff on that front. To help us sort it all out, Kevin Noon of Buckeye Huddle is here to join me to discuss it all. Kevin, I guess let's start with the guys who are not going to be a part of the 2023 offensive line. On Wednesday, Dwan Jones announced that he was going to be turning pro. That was not a big surprise, but it does leave a very big Dwan Jones size hole at the right tackle spot for the Buckeyes right now.
Yeah, big Thanos out. And this is on the heels of the news of Paris Johnson leaving. Neither of these moves are really a big surprise, in my opinion. I think we all kind of knew going into this that Ohio State was going to be tackle shopping, for lack of a better term, and whether it was internally or externally, I won't get ahead of myself, but Dwan Jones, somebody who was a bit of a, throw-in in terms of his recruiting class, a basketball player who had to sit there and learn how to play football, a guy who had all the size in the world and a lot of athleticism, and it took a hot minute for him to learn how to play the offensive line, and he's really played well in his opportunities as a starter. I mean, he was solid this year. I don't think he's somebody that if he would have played another year that would have significantly seen his draft stock go up. You may as well strike while the iron is hot. Ohio State's offensive line played pretty well this year. They did not get to the finalist level for the Joe Moore Award given to the top offensive line in the nation, but I think they got up to the semifinal level. Dwan will be an intriguing talent. It'll be interesting to see what NFL front offices think of him, as he still probably has a good amount of work to do to reshape his body. I mean, Coach Mick and the staff did wonders with him in the time he was here, but once football becomes his 24 hours a day, 7-day a week pursuit, we'll see what happens there, but it certainly creates some nervous moments for Ohio State fans and probably Ohio State coaches alike, as Ohio State is going to be looking at multiple holes to fill on the line. And you're right, Dwan Jones casts the biggest shadow, at least in terms of his stature. But I think all 3 guys that are on their way out create their own sets of issues for the Buckeyes.
Yeah, no doubt, because this was not a particularly deep unit in 2022, and now you're looking at replacing 3 guys because, as you mentioned, Paris Johnson, he announced on, I think, Monday this week. He was the first guy to announce that he was going to be leaving. And, that's really not a big surprise. He's someone who, he came in with all the measurables, all the tools, all the athleticism of a 5-star and, lived up to his billing. He played a little bit as a true freshman in some of those college football playoff games when they needed someone to slide in at guard. Started at guard as a sophomore, started at left tackle this year. Very solid all the way across the board. He is off to the NFL. And I think we probably all season were sort of assuming they were going to have to replace both of those tackles. Someone who I don't know that everyone was sort of assuming was going to go was Luke Wypler. That was a little bit more of a surprise to me, and I think to a lot of other folks, when he announced on Tuesday night that he was going to be going as well, turning pro. He is, presumably one of the top centers on the board. He's, I don't think anyone's expecting him to be a first-round pick, but will probably end up being one of the first centers off the board. That leaves a pretty significant hole in the middle of that line that I don't know if Ohio State, I would guess Ohio State's coaches spent the whole season assuming they were going to have to replace both tackles. I don't know if they necessarily assumed back in August that they were going to be looking to replace Luke Wypler as well.
Yeah, I have so many things I want to say here, so I'm going to see if I can get them in order. First thing, Ryan Day and the football staff should talk to Chris Holtman and the basketball staff about somebody that they don't expect to leaving, because that seems to happen a lot on the basketball sides of things. I'm looking at one certain basketball player who's playing his way into maybe being a one and done. But as for Luke Wypler, probably doesn't have the notoriety that somebody like a Nick Mangold had leaving Ohio State, or even a Billy Price or a Pat Elflein. It's going to be a pretty weak center draft. I've talked to a couple of NFL types already who have said that it was not a surprising move to them, really, once the move was made, just based on what the center draft is going to look like. So if there are not a lot of bodies there at the position, you would think that as long as you check off enough of the boxes that you might be able to go a little bit higher and maybe be able to secure a little bit more money. Luke Wypler performed pretty well this season. I mean, looked pretty good in the Peach Bowl game. Didn't really have to go against Jalen Carter as much as people would have expected going into the game, but I think the whole interior offensive line performed well against Carter. Carter was, I'm not going to say largely ineffective. Carter's presence out there is already enough of an issue, but Ohio State up the middle did a pretty good job, and Whippler was very clean as a center. And now that creates a lot of issues too, because is Jacob James your number 2? Is Toby Wilson your number 2? Is Toby Wilson going to follow Kevin Wilson to Tulsa? I mean, a lot of questions there at this point of what's going to happen there. But, I'm getting ahead of myself. Ohio State got some good news as well. So I think we kind of know what the center position is going to look like. But again, this is a case of getting your 5 best guys out there. And if you can sit there and you determine that somebody is better at guard than they are at center, and you have to sit there and set up a situation at center to make sure you're getting your 5 best out there, what are you going to do? But coupled with this situation, are you going to have somebody who's a little bit more inexperienced at center dealing with a first-year starting quarterback, which, I know this isn't a quarterback show, but yes, C.J. Stroud hasn't announced yet. As of the time of recording this, C.J. Stroud has until the 16th to make his announcement. I don't think anybody will be surprised when C.J. says, I'm out of here, I'm going to the draft, I'm vying for the number 1 position overall in the draft. So a lot of questions. So now we have discussed 3 vacancies on an offensive line that, Ohio State's offensive line has been a bit of a strength. I mean, in terms of their on the field play. Recruiting, on the other hand, I have a feeling we'll talk about that here in a couple minutes here on this edition of Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning.
Yeah, we'll get to why they're maybe in some rather dire straits in just a minute, but did want to get one piece of good news that Ohio State got this week, which is Matt Jones is coming back. Now, he was really good he was really good for a good chunk of the season, and then got hurt, and then was sort of playing compromised for a big chunk of the latter portion of the season. But in that Peach Bowl, he was really good once again, and having him back for a team that really had only 7 guys really truly in the circle of trust in 2022. You had the 5 starters, you had Josh Frye, you had Enoch Vamahi. You've got 7 guys in the circle of trust. 3 of them have now left. So getting Matt Jones back and keeping at least 4 of those circle of trust guys for 2023, that is a massive, massive piece of good news for Ohio State, because that was far from a given that he would be back. He could have gone to the NFL. He could have gone somewhere else. Getting him back, whether he's a center or a guard, just having one more of those spots on the line where you can just sort of check that box and feel pretty good about it, that is probably the biggest Christmas present that Justin Frye could have gotten.
Yeah, I mean, at least in terms of realistic Christmas presents, we all ask for the super, I want a Golden Tee machine, but it's not that bad when you sit there and you get a PS5 or something like that. I mean, he certainly wasn't going to get Paris Johnson back, probably wasn't going to get Dwan Jones back, but by getting Matt Jones back is a big deal. I think that is very big for Ohio State. I think it is a big deal because he does give you somebody who is experienced at the center position. He is somebody who is a very talented guard as well. So what does that end up resulting in? I guess we're going to have to kind of wait and see what the plans are, as I had mentioned, about being able to get your 5 best players out there. And I think Matt Jones can absolutely lock down that center position. I think he gives you a security net at that position. This is a guard-heavy team. There are a lot of guards on this lineup, pretty thin at tackle. I mean, certainly I named a couple of names for center, but if you can lock down center, which is such a critical position. The center has every offensive play. The center's dealing with that ball. And, if you have a center that's airmailing snaps or rolling them back to the quarterback or whatever, I don't care how good Marvin Harrison Jr. is. I don't care how healthy Trevion Henderson is. If your center is subpar, you're in trouble. So, I think that conventional wisdom at this point says that Matt Jones is going to be your guy at center. You have a cast of characters that you can kind of pair alongside, whether or not you put Donovan Jackson at guard or tackle. I think that they're going to be fine there. But, I think tackle is going to be something that is going to keep the coaches up at night a little bit. And it'll be a very interesting spring practice period to see what things look like there, because it's been a while since I can sit there and look at an Ohio State roster and say, I'm really not sure what their tackle situation is.
Yeah, it does feel like that's kind of a little bit of a mystery. We have sort of talked about Donovan Jackson getting kicked out from guard to left tackle. And, maybe that's a possibility. He certainly seems like he has the athleticism to potentially do that. But until you do it, you haven't done it. And that is a very important spot on the line. And, even if you do, then you've still got to fill another guard spot. When we talked to Kevin Wilson at the Peach Bowl, he indicated that even though he was going to Tulsa, I think the plan was for Toby Wilson to stay at Ohio State and not follow him to Tulsa. So we'll see if that is how that ends up playing out. But either way, they've got to fill one of those four, however you want to align the four kind of returning starter type guys or returning circle of trust kind of guys, however you want to align them, you do have one more spot to fill. And you mentioned Zen Michalski, and if Zen Michalski is ready to play left tackle, that I think is probably the best case scenario for Ohio State. And they've certainly got other guys in there, younger guys. Tager Shabola is someone who people have been very high on. You've got other guys who, if guys are ready, third year guy like Ben Christman, is he ready to maybe take another step? You've got other guys who are in that kind of who've been around for a long time, where you're kind of in the spot where you've got two choices, and one of them is to get off the pot. And so we'll see. We'll see whether some of the returning veteran guys are maybe ready to take a step, or in the transfer portal. They have been certainly very active pursuing people in the transfer portal, and missed out on guys going to Oregon and going to Florida State and a whole bunch of different spots, USC recently. So, they're still actively in there, and there are certainly names in there that they're pursuing, but going to be whether it's the transfer portal, whether it's the current roster, whether it's one of the true freshmen coming in, whatever it is, they're going to have to find at least one more body, and you're going to probably want more than one. You're going to want to be up to 7 or 8 guys in that circle of trust this fall. So it should be a very busy year for Justin Frye. You did mention the recruiting piece of this, and I think that this is one of these things where offensive line is not a spot where you can just immediately pull people in and just immediately solve the problem necessarily. You're not generally bringing in true freshmen. This is a problem that accumulates over time. And it does feel like Justin Frye is probably going to be the person that everyone's yelling at this fall. But it feels like the actual root cause of this problem really kind of predates Justin Frye.
Well, offensive line to begin with is the most difficult position to really project, because you just don't know. You're dealing with kids that just genetically are big kids. Okay, you're 6'6" and 285. So are you a corner or are you an offensive tackle? Well, you're an offensive tackle. You're doing so much, you get so little time with these recruits to be able to go over things with them in person, with the way that the NC2A rules work and everything else. But it really does seem as if Ohio State, in the pre-Justin Frye days, in the Greg Studrawa days, had more misses than hits. And you now have a roster of guys, a lot of guys that are in their third, have gone through 3 years, but have had a redshirt year and have had a COVID year. So, they still have multiple years of eligibility, and they're still no closer to the 2 deep. And because of that, these guys are going to have to make decisions. Ohio State's going to have some very difficult conversations and be like, okay, is this guy going to be somebody that's going to be in the 2 deep, or do we sit there and have a very frank conversation and say, partner, I don't think it's going to work out here. And even when you do that, you create more holes in the line. And I think that Ohio State's tackle recruiting was feast or famine. And feast was obviously somebody like Paris Johnson Jr., who was kind of a can't-miss recruit. Well, he's 3 and done. So now you're sitting there, and I think even when you recruit Paris Johnson Jr., you prepare yourselves for a 3-and-done situation, even though that's very rare for an offensive lineman. But, what happens for everybody else? I mean, people clamor, I hope this guy gets a 6th year. Well, if this guy gets a 6th year and hasn't played, how is that helping anything? Oh, well, we at least know who he is. Yeah, we know that he can't play. So we know that Greg Sturava couldn't recruit. And that's come home to roost for Ohio State at this point. And people have been all over Justin Frye that here in year 1 in his first cycle that he wasn't able to, close on, a lot of these major names. And, it is disappointing, but, 24, Ian Moore will be there, but that doesn't help in this, in this class. I think Ohio State will do well in recruiting in 24. But, they don't have anybody coming in on the offensive line in terms of the portal. They don't really have an immediate plug-and-play player in the recruiting class, which, again, is rare. I mean, if Ohio State has to trot Luke Montgomery out there at tackle, I mean, that's kind of an indictment of where the roster stands at this point. So, for the people who've been saying, well, what about Luke Montgomery? You better hope that Luke Montgomery isn't out there because it could mean one of a couple things. Luke Montgomery is really, really good, and nobody really saw just how talented he is, or, oh no, we don't have anybody else. And that situation is by far the most scary proposition on the table.
Yeah, a true freshman starting on the offensive line is either a generational talent or a real serious depth problem. And generational talents definitionally do not come around very often. You only get so many Orlando Paces. And, even Michael Jordan, who did it at Ohio State, was not necessarily 100% up to speed in his first year. That's kind of a tough spot to put a true freshman in. So I'm sure Ohio State is hoping to not have that be the answer, but they have to find an answer one way or the other. So we will continue talking about this, I'm sure, quite a bit over the coming weeks as they sort of try and sort things out. Planning to have Ross Fulton on tomorrow's show to talk about some of the schematic issues with the offensive line and how this might impact what they're able to do on the offensive line and on offense this fall. So you can look forward to that on tomorrow's show. But for now, that will do it. You can find much more conversation about Ohio State football, some of the ongoing drama with the NFL draft declarations, the transfer portal, all that fun stuff at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Kevin and Tony and I all covering the team there. Mark Givler and Alex Gleitman covering recruiting there. There's plenty to talk about on that front as well. And then Ross Fulton, and Devin, and Justin, and Michael. Lots of really, really great X's and O's and scheme kind of coverage there as well. Talk a little basketball there. Lots of good stuff, all at BuckeyeHuddle.com. That will do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.